Hi everyone. Welcome to English Story School. Have you ever felt paralyzed by fear? That overwhelming feeling that stops you dead in your tracks, making you question everything you've ever wanted to achieve? The truth is, fear is a lie. But here's the most important part. When you realize that, you'll begin to understand the real battle, the battle within yourself. Chapter 1. The Illusion of Fear. Let me take you back to a time in my life when fear nearly stopped me from pursuing my dreams. It was one of those pivotal moments where everything seemed to hang in the balance, where a single decision could change the course of my life forever. I was standing at a crossroads, looking ahead at two paths, one that was familiar, safe, and predictable, and another that was uncertain, risky, but filled with promise. I was about to make a major life decision, and the weight of it was suffocating. Every part of me told me to play it safe, to follow the path that everyone else had taken. It seemed like the logical choice, the responsible choice. The path that everyone else followed had been paved for me, and all I had to do was walk down it. It seemed like the smart decision. I had seen others take that route, and they seemed fine, happy, successful, comfortable. The future was secure on that path. But deep down, I knew that something greater was waiting for me. I knew that I couldn't be satisfied with simply going through the motions, living a life just like everyone else. Still, I hesitated. There was a voice in my head, a voice that had become all too familiar, whispering doubts into my ear. What if you fail? It asked. What if you're not good enough? What if you take this risk and fall flat on your face? The fear gripped me, tugging at my confidence, pulling me back into the comfort zone that I had always known. Every fiber of my being screamed to stay where it was safe. What if the worst happened? What if I couldn't handle the pressure? What if I wasn't cut out for the life I dreamed about? The fear was overwhelming. And in those moments, it felt like the truth, like a heavy weight that kept me grounded, paralyzed by the thought of failure. That voice, that fear was a lie. But at the time, it didn't feel like one. It felt real. It felt like the undeniable truth. It was a lie dressed up as protection. It was the part of me that was terrified of change, of the unknown, and of risking the comfort of the present. Fear has a way of disguising itself as caution, as common sense, as rationality. It convinces you that staying in your comfort zone is safer, that following the crowd is the best choice. But what I didn't realize at that time was that this fear wasn't a warning sign. It was a smokescreen designed to keep me from seeing the truth of what was on the other side. I could feel it deep down. I could feel that something more was waiting for me. But the fear of failure, the fear of judgment, and the fear of the unknown clouded my vision. It was as if fear was the fog that blocked my ability to see clearly, distorting everything around me, making the unknown seem like a monstrous threat rather than an opportunity for growth. The worst part? I believed it. I gave it power. But there was something in me, a small voice, a glimmer of belief, that began to cut through the fog. I started to see fear for what it really was, a false narrative. It wasn't a warning sign. It was a barrier built by my own insecurities, my own doubts, and my own unwillingness to step outside my comfort zone. And in that moment, I realized that I had been living my life under the false assumption that fear was a reliable guide. That fear had been steering my decisions, keeping me stagnant, keeping me safe. But that safety was an illusion. The more I thought about it, the more I understood. Fear was not a sign to stop. It was a signal that I was on the verge of something significant. It was the voice that only showed up when I was about to step into something unknown, something that had the potential to change my life for the better. It wasn't a warning. It was the resistance I had to push through to get to where I wanted to be. And the only way to break through that barrier was to confront it head on. And so I decided that I would. I would confront the fear that had held me back for so long. I would stop listening to the lies it told me. I would stop giving it power over my life. The truth is, fear will always be there. It's a part of being human. But what defines us is not the fear itself, but how we respond to it. Would I let it control me, or would I choose to move forward despite it? That was the defining moment, the moment when I realized that fear wasn't the enemy. The real enemy was allowing that fear to stop me from living the life I was meant to lead. And so, I took the first step. I chose to stop letting fear dictate my choices. I chose to step into the unknown, to embrace the discomfort, and to trust that by facing the fear head-on, I would ultimately break through to something greater than I could have imagined. Chapter 2. The Struggle Within. Fear doesn't just paralyze you. It doesn't just make you hesitate. It holds you back from becoming who you're truly meant to be. It sinks its claws into your self-doubt and feeds on it. And the more you listen to it, the stronger it grows. It starts off as a whisper, a nagging voice that tries to keep you in your comfort zone. But if you give it power, it eventually becomes a roar that drowns out every other thought. The real battle isn't against external forces. It's against your own mind, your own thoughts, and your own beliefs. The struggle is not just against what you can see, but against the stories you've been telling yourself for years. I remember a time when I stood at the edge of something great. I had the chance to step into the unknown, to take a risk that could change everything. The opportunity was everything I had ever dreamed of, but the fear was suffocating. I knew this was it, the moment I'd been waiting for. But even though the future was calling, all I could hear were the questions. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if this isn't meant for me? Each thought felt like a weight that I couldn't shake off, a barrier that kept me rooted in place. It was as though the very idea of change triggered a war inside my mind, a battle I wasn't sure I could win. The more I thought about it, the stronger the fear became. The possibility of failure seemed to loom over me like a dark cloud, threatening to crush the hope and excitement I had been holding on to. What if I wasn't capable? What if the risks outweighed the rewards? The thoughts spiraled, one after another, and I began to question my own worth. Every time I looked at the opportunity, the fear grew louder, feeding on the insecurities I had buried deep within myself. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm just not enough. It was in those moments that I realized that fear wasn't just an obstacle. It was the enemy of progress. It wasn't the unknown that was holding me back. It was the fear of stepping into it. I could feel the fear choking my ability to see clearly, clouding my vision of the potential that lay ahead. The longer I let it control my thoughts, the further I moved away from what I could become. Fear, in its most insidious form, had become my own worst enemy. It wasn't the risk or the challenges I was afraid of. It was the voice in my head telling me I wasn't good enough to face them. But in that moment of overwhelming doubt, I remembered something important, something that shifted my perspective. Fear is the enemy of progress. I had heard it before, but now it was a truth I felt deeply. Fear wasn't just an emotion to push through. It was the force that kept me stuck. It was the invisible barrier that stopped me from taking the first step, from reaching the heights I knew I could achieve. The longer I listened to it, the more it held me back from the life I truly wanted. The longer I let it dictate my decisions, the further I moved away from my true potential. What I hadn't realized was that fear wasn't the real challenge. The external challenges, the unknowns, the risks, the obstacles, those were the things I could face, adapt to, and overcome. But the real battle was within me. It was about confronting the lies I had been telling myself for years. It was about tearing down the false beliefs that fear had built up in my mind. Fear told me I wasn't ready, but it was lying. Fear told me I couldn't handle it, but it was lying. Fear told me I wasn't capable of stepping up, but it was lying. The truth was I was capable. I was more than enough. The fear I was feeling wasn't a reflection of my limitations. It was a reflection of the potential I hadn't yet tapped into. The only thing holding me back was the fear I had given so much power to. The moment I realized that, something inside me shifted. I stopped focusing on the obstacles and started focusing on what I could control, my response to the fear. I realized that the only way to win this battle was to face it head on. I had to stop letting fear dictate my actions and start acting in spite of it. It wasn't about eliminating the fear. It was about moving forward with it, stepping into the unknown even though the fear was still there. I started taking small steps. The fear didn't disappear overnight, but it lost its grip on me. Every step I took, no matter how small, built my confidence. With each challenge, I realized that fear was not my enemy. It was simply a part of the journey. It was the voice I had to overcome, the barrier I had to break through in order to get to the next level. The struggle within wasn't just about defeating the fear. It was about reclaiming my power. It was about realizing that I had the strength to face any obstacle, not because I was fearless, but because I had the courage to move forward despite the fear. The true battle wasn't against the world around me. It was against the limits I had placed on myself. The moment I chose to fight that battle, I understood that the real victory wasn't in defeating fear, but in choosing to act in the face of it. Chapter 3. The Turning Point. Then came the moment of truth. That moment when I had to choose. I was standing at the crossroads of my own destiny, holding the weight of a decision that could change everything. I could either continue down the path I had been walking, listening to the fear that had held me back for so long, or I could take the leap into the unknown, trust myself, and finally break free from the chains of doubt. The fear, as always, was there, loud, relentless, and convincing. It whispered in my ear, reminding me of everything that could go wrong. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? What if this was all a mistake? Those questions echoed through my mind, each one more powerful than the last, making my heart race and my palms sweat. It was familiar, like an old friend I had carried with me for years. And yet, in that moment, something shifted. The fear didn't magically disappear, but I realized that it wasn't real. It wasn't a reflection of the future. It was a creation of my mind, an illusion designed to keep me in place, to keep me comfortable. I knew deep down that fear had never been the truth. It was simply a mask for the unknown, a smokescreen created to stop me from taking the next step. And that's when I made a powerful decision. I chose to move forward. I chose to step into the unknown, despite the fear, despite the doubts that still clouded my mind. It wasn't a bold, fearless moment. It wasn't a moment of perfect clarity, but it was a decision to trust myself, to trust that I had the strength to face whatever was ahead. Every step was a fight. I could feel the fear tugging at my heels, pulling me back towards safety, back toward comfort. But I didn't stop. I took one step after another, forcing myself to move forward, no matter how hard it felt. And with each step, the fear began to lose its power. It wasn't that it disappeared. It was that I started to see it for what it was, a lie, a distortion of reality. The more I pushed through it, the less control it had over me. I began to see the truth. Fear is a lie that fades when you take action. The more you confront it, the weaker it becomes. The more you choose to step into the unknown, the less intimidating it feels. Fear loses its grip when you stop running from it and start using it as fuel. I understood that fear wasn't something to avoid. It was something to embrace. It was a signal that I was on the right track, a reminder that growth comes from stepping outside of what feels comfortable. I won't lie to you. The fear didn't vanish completely. It never does. But what changed was how I dealt with it. Instead of running from it, I confronted it. I stopped letting it control my choices. Instead of waiting for the fear to disappear before I took action, I moved forward anyway, in spite of it. The more I took action, the less power the fear had over me. It became less like an obstacle and more like a challenge, something I could overcome, something I could use to push myself further. Every step I took made me stronger. The path ahead, once shrouded in doubt and uncertainty, began to clear. And suddenly, the future didn't seem so intimidating. In fact, it became exciting. The unknown was no longer a source of fear. It became a source of possibility. Because I realized that fear wasn't something to be afraid of. It was simply a sign that I was on the right track. It was a signal that I was pushing the boundaries of my comfort zone, that I was moving towards something greater than I had ever imagined. The breakthrough didn't come from achieving some perfect outcome. It came from the act of choosing to face the fear head on, to take the leap, to trust myself despite the doubt. That was the turning point. The moment I realized that fear was never the enemy. It was just a part of the process. The real enemy was letting fear keep me stuck, letting it control my decisions and my life. And so, I kept moving forward, one step at a time, no matter how small, no matter how uncertain. The path ahead wasn't clear, it wasn't easy, but with each step, I felt more and more empowered. I felt more like the person I had always wanted to be. The person who was willing to take risks, to face challenges, and to move toward the life I wanted, not because the fear was gone, but because I had learned how to live with it and still move forward. Chapter 4. The Power of Action. When you stop allowing fear to dictate your decisions, something amazing happens. You begin to take control. Fear, that ever-present voice that tells you to stay small, to stay safe, loses its grip. You start to realize that the only thing keeping you from moving forward is your own reluctance to take action. Action becomes the antidote to fear. The more you act, the less power fear has over you. It's as though every small movement you make shatters the illusion that fear has been building around you. I can't even tell you how many times I've been in situations where fear tried to stop me. There have been countless moments when I stood on the edge of a decision, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands trembling. I could feel the weight of the fear pressing down on me, trying to hold me back. I remember times when my mind was clouded with what ifs. What if I fail? What if I regret this? And yet, despite all of that, every time I acted anyway, even when I was shaking inside, I felt stronger. The more I moved, the more I pushed myself through the discomfort, the more I realized that the fear I was facing wasn't some undefeatable monster. It was a temporary obstacle that faded the more I chose to act. Every small win, every step forward, proved to me that fear wasn't the enemy. It was merely a challenge I had to face. And the best way to defeat it? Action. Every time I took a step, every time I did something in spite of the fear, it was like pulling the power away from the fear itself. I remember thinking, if I can take this step, if I can do this despite the fear, then I can do anything. And that thought alone fueled me to keep going. The more action I took, the less space fear had to grow. Action conquers fear. This quote became my mantra, my constant reminder. The simple act of moving forward, of making a decision to take action, no matter how small, began to feel like a powerful tool that cut through the fog of doubt and anxiety. Fear thrives in inaction. When you sit and let fear control your thoughts, it grows. It festers in that space of hesitation, in that place of waiting for the perfect moment that will never come. Fear convinces you that you're not ready, that you don't have what it takes. But the truth is, you'll never feel ready. There will always be doubts, always be uncertainties. And that's where action comes in. It's the cure for that paralysis. When you make the decision to act, to move forward, no matter how small the step, you take the power away from fear. It's as though you're reclaiming control of your own life. You begin to realize that you are the one in the driver's seat. Fear doesn't control the wheel anymore. And in that moment, you step into your own power. You stop waiting for things to line up perfectly, for everything to be in place before you act. You stop waiting for fear to disappear. Because the truth is, fear never really goes away. It just becomes irrelevant when you start moving, when you start making decisions that align with who you truly are and what you want out of life. I remember when I took my first big step, when I decided to act even though the fear was still loud, still present. I thought, what if I fail? What if this doesn't work out? But then I realized the only way to find out was to try. And that first step was the hardest, no doubt. But after that, everything changed. The fear still whispered, but it was quieter now, less powerful. With each action, I gained more confidence, more clarity, and more conviction. I didn't need all the answers. I didn't need to know exactly how everything would turn out. I just needed to keep moving forward. And so, with every action I took, I dismantled the very foundation that fear was built on. Fear was built on the idea that I needed to wait for the perfect moment, that I needed to be certain before making a move. But when I stopped waiting, when I started acting in spite of the uncertainty, I realized something powerful. Fear was no longer an obstacle. It was just a part of the process. Fear was no longer something that could control me. It became the fuel for my growth. Every time I made the choice to act, I felt a little stronger. Every time I moved forward, the road became a little clearer. And eventually, the fear that once held me back became a distant memory, something I could look back on and realize how much I had grown since then. The real lesson wasn't just in conquering fear. It was in realizing that I could move forward despite it. I could create my future, not by waiting for everything to be perfect, but by making imperfect decisions and learning from them. And that's when I truly began to lead my life. Not by waiting, not by listening to fear, but by stepping up and taking action every single day, no matter how uncertain things seemed. Action, no matter how small, was my declaration that I was ready. Ready to create, ready to grow, and ready to own my destiny. Chapter 5. The Real Victory. The real victory comes not when you eliminate fear. It comes when you learn to live with it and not let it control you. Fear, as much as we wish it would disappear, will always be there. It's not something you can avoid, no matter how much you try to run from it. It will show up in different forms, sometimes as doubt, sometimes as anxiety, and sometimes as hesitation. But the truth is, fear is part of the human experience. And the moment you accept that it will never completely go away, you begin to understand something crucial. Fear only has the power you give it. For so long, I believed that the goal was to get rid of the fear, to somehow make it vanish so I could live a life free from it. But the more I tried to avoid it, the more I realized it had a grip on me. The key wasn't in eliminating fear. It was in understanding that fear, in and of itself, was not my enemy. It was the way I reacted to it that mattered. It was about not allowing fear to control my choices, not allowing it to make me doubt my potential. I can tell you now that fear isn't something you can fight and defeat in the traditional sense. The real battle isn't about fighting fear until it goes away. It's about changing your relationship with fear, learning to live alongside it, and choosing to move forward in spite of it. Fear will always be there, lurking in the background, whispering its lies. But when you stop fearing the fear itself, you realize it has no power over you. In my own journey, I realized that every time fear crept in, I had two choices. I could let it paralyze me, or I could choose to move through it. Moving through it didn't mean pretending it wasn't there. It meant acknowledging it, understanding its presence, and continuing anyway. Fear only controls you if you allow it to dictate your actions. Once I understood that, everything changed. Fear became less of a force and more of a signal. A signal that I was on the right path, that I was challenging myself, that I was growing. Let me leave you with this. The greatest battle you'll ever fight is the one within yourself. This is the core of the real victory. It isn't about the external challenges you face. It's not about overcoming other people's doubts or defeating external circumstances. The real battle is within you. The battle between your fear and your potential, between your insecurities and your strengths. Overcoming fear isn't about eliminating it. It's about recognizing that it's a lie, a distortion created to keep you from achieving your greatness. I've learned that the real victory lies in the moment you decide not to let fear control you. When you confront it head-on, when you refuse to be held back by the what-ifs and the not good enoughs, you start to unlock your true potential. The victory comes when you no longer allow fear to decide what you're capable of. The next time fear creeps in, and it will, remember this: fear is a lie. It is not the truth of who you are, nor does it define your potential. The real battle is inside of you. It is the battle of whether you choose to listen to the lies that fear tells you or to listen to the truth of who you are and what you're capable of. Fear can only hold you back if you let it. Once you conquer that internal battle, once you break through that barrier of self-doubt, nothing will stop you. The truth is that fear is not something to be feared. It's simply a part of the process, a necessary challenge that will appear anytime you step into growth. It's a signal that you are pushing yourself, that you are on the brink of something bigger than you ever imagined. It's the mark of progress. And when you realize that, fear becomes nothing more than a stepping stone on your journey toward greatness. So, the next time fear tries to stop you, step forward instead. Embrace it, acknowledge it, but don't let it make the decision for you. The only real victory is the one you achieve when you take action, when you continue moving forward, even when fear is present. Because when you do that, you'll realize that fear doesn't own you. You own your destiny. With that said, thanks for watching and for being a part of this journey with me. Until next time, remember, fear is a lie, and the real battle is inside of you. Once you conquer that battle, nothing will stop you.